The Wiradjuri people are a group of Indigenous Australians united by a common language. They're located throughout central New South Wales. To understand the health needs of this population group, it can be useful to look at the data relating to mortality and hospital admissions for Indigenous people from this area. According to the Australian Indigenous Health Infonet data from 2016, coronary heart disease is the leading cause of mortality for Indigenous Australians, and more than double the rate of the next leading factor, diabetes. Chronic lung disease, followed by lung cancer, suicide and cirrhosis of the liver are the next major contributors to mortality of the Indigenous people from this region. The leading causes of hospitalisation for Indigenous people are injury, including poisoning, followed by diseases of the respiratory system, diseases of the digestive system, and mental and behavioural disorders, followed by diseases of the circulatory system. For Indigenous people in rural New South Wales, proximity to traditional lands can mean that the population may not be close to health services that support them. This leads to a reduced access to health professionals to monitor diabetes and other chronic diseases. Jowsey and others in their paper contend that the experience of Aboriginal people with mainstream health providers is poor, as the service is not seen by Indigenous users as being culturally safe, respectful or worthwhile. In contrast to this, Aboriginal community-controlled health services are often the choice for many Indigenous people when they're available, due to the fact they're more culturally welcoming. In comparing the contribution of geography and preventable hospitalisations for Indigenous people in New South Wales, it was found by Harold and others in their article that the remoter an Aboriginal community was, the higher its rate of hospitalisation for preventable illnesses. This seems to indicate that a lack of easily accessed health services means that people from these communities are seeking treatment when their conditions are at a more advanced stage, thus leading to poorer health outcomes for the Wiradjuri people.
As health professionals, our role is to help certain groups improve their overall health rather than focusing on individual health. To be able to achieve this as a health professional, we must have a variety of skills in our field and information, such as statistics on certain groups' health. Indigenous Australians, specifically the Wiradjuri tribe, are a group which suffer great health inequities within Australia. The Wiradjuri tribe make up 5.4% of the total Indigenous population. The first step to reducing these health inequities as a health professional is to gather information on the nature and extent of the problem. By gathering information on the nature and extent, we can identify the health needs of the Wiradjuri people. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics Indigenous Health Survey, almost 1/3 of Indigenous population 2 to 14 years of age were overweight or obese. This is compared to the non-Indigenous Australians at 6.5%. As well, health professionals, we must have the knowledge to know that health is not just physical. Due to this, we must also know information which can tell us more about the health needs of the Wiradjuri tribe. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, suicide accounted for 4.2% of Indigenous deaths compared to 1.6% for all Australians. Rates of suicide in Indigenous Australians is almost 4 times that for all Australians. Another health need of the Wiradjuri tribe is nutritional health. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics Indigenous Health Survey, the average energy intake among Indigenous males is 9,175 kilojoules. This is much over the recommended daily intake of 8,700 kilojoules stated by mydailyintake.net. Energy intake for an individual should only increase if the more energy is required, such as partaking in high levels of physical activity. Looking into the mental health needs of the Wiradjuri tribe is also a step in improving the overall health of this Indigenous tribe. A survey conducted by the Australian Bureau of Statistics states that 30% of Indigenous Australians aged over 18 had experienced high or very high levels of psychological distress in the 4 weeks before the survey. This is significantly smaller than the national average of 20.3%. The use of illicit substances is a large risk factor in many illnesses. Therefore, we can identify another health need of the Wiradjuri tribe. As the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that 45.4% of Indigenous Australians over the age of 15 have used some form of illicit substance at some time in their life. This is evidently a health need specifically of the Wiradjuri tribe, but these rates are much higher than the national average of 19%. Finally, another major health need of the Wiradjuri tribe is disease of the respiratory system, as according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, they account for 7.5% of deaths within the Indigenous population.
The health needs of the Indigenous people of Australia are far greater than the health needs of the non-Indigenous people in Australia. One of the contributing factors behind this is the fact that most, but not all, Indigenous people reject their health needs being provided to them. One example is why there's a rejection in these health needs is because the indigenous people of Australia, have a lack of trust for the non-indigenous people, as suggested by Grassi. The Wurundjeri tribe, in particular, have conflicts with the European settlers in 1813, where the land was taken, the people were murdered and raped. Since then, there has been hostility, even if it involves simple visits to the doctors. A major factor as to why the indigenous people do not trust the non-indigenous people is due to the stolen generation also. This is because the stolen generation has impacted all current indigenous people's health, affecting them mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. As a result, the stolen generation negatively affects the early evidence in the Wurundjeri community to this very day. The indigenous population have tried to cope with the trauma, and one method particularly was substance abuse. This is supported by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. Excessive alcohol consumption can cause significant harm. It is a major risk factor for morbidity and mortality for all populations. Substance abuse is a major reason behind the large gap between the health needs of the indigenous population and the non-indigenous. As a substance abuse, alcohol is much higher in the indigenous people of Australia than non-indigenous people of Australia. Indigenous females and males were 2 to 3 times more likely to consume alcohol, stated by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare.
People of Aboriginal descent, such as those from the Wurundjeri tribe, have suffered negative experiences when consulting their health professionals. Aboriginal people living in Indigenous areas recount their experiences with health professionals as greatly affected due to many contributing factors. These factors can include a lack of education, affordability, general knowledge, and it has been statistically proven that Aboriginal people don't regularly visit their local health professionals. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare states that 15% of the population have reported that they need to go to doctors within the previous 12 months, however had not gone. Another 7% needed to visit hospitals, but once again reported had not going. This is just one of the many examples of the inequities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Another major contributing factor for the Wurundjeri people when it comes to their experiences with health services is the issue of them not being able to experience health services due to their location and access to services availability. The Australian Bureau of Statistics states that not enough services are in particular areas, being 39%, and no services in the areas at all, 35%. Furthermore, the Indigenous population living in Indigenous areas may find health services as culturally unacceptable and not culturally safe due to many possible factors such as racism, lack of trust, and also discrimination, and as a result choosing traditional and cultural practices when it comes to their health. Overall, these are just some of the problems that the Indigenous population experience and must be addressed thoroughly to reduce the inequities and significant amount of their health in the near future. As a future diversional therapist, it is of great importance to come to understanding about the inequities about Aboriginal people face when it comes to their overall health and help create specific leisure programs which can cater and improve their overall health. One need that the Indigenous population suffer from is the high rate of obesity and lack of physical activity. The Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2013 stated that 68% of Aboriginal people aged 15 and over were overweight or obese. One particular professional skill needed as a diversional therapist to treat this is to have good communication skills and to be able to interact and communicate with the people. This will allow me as a diversional therapist to create leisure programs which can directly help their level of obesity and improve their overall health and reduce the inequities. The Wurundjeri people have similar health outcomes as the non-Indigenous people, and one of the health inequities can be reduced through the Closing the Gap. Close the Gap is an initiative that aims to reduce the major offences on Australian well-being of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people of Australia. As stated by Birch in 2015, Closing the Gap is an Indigenous disadvantage initiative that has a target aim of closing the gap by 2031. This increases the likelihood of the suffering of a variety of health conditions caused by obesity and best reported lower expectancies by 8% for men and 6% for women, according to Grove. Another skill required is the skill of sympathy and empathy. Overall, the Indigenous have suffered inequities and therefore are hesitant to seek professional help when it comes to overall health. As a future diversional therapist, it is important to be able to take into consideration the Indigenous people's culture and traditions while creating leisure programs, and create programs which are solely focused on society's perspectives and programs that will suit their needs.
The health experiences of the Wurundjeri people will be compared with the experiences of the Tharawal people that reside in the Camden community. Regardless of their tribal differences, both Indigenous groups have similar health needs that need to be acknowledged, such as the fact that one of the reasons why Aboriginal individuals experience psychological stress is due to the loss of connection to land. Both Indigenous groups have health services that have been funded and provided by their local health services. The Murrumbidgee Local Health District provides specific programs that acknowledge and recognise the health needs of the Wiradjuri people. Although health services have been recognised and provided to the people of the Tharawal Indigenous group, specific support services have been mentioned, as well as their specific target groups within the Indigenous community of Camden. Collaboration between the Aboriginal community and local people are present in both Indigenous groups, though the people of the Wiradjuri are involved and part of the staff that provide the health services to their specific group. Local health district for this group believe Aboriginal health staff can act as a link between practitioner and patient. For the Tharawal people, the Camden City Council has reported that Aboriginal individuals are reluctant to engage in health services catered for them due to the previous historical events that has occurred.
Working with people to provide ways for them to carry out activities and tasks are important. It's a key role for occupational therapists. To be able to do this effectively, it is important for me to understand the cultural context of my clients, in this case the Wiradjuri people. This allows me as a therapist to communicate effectively to create programs that are more likely to benefit the client and more closely aligned with what the client would like to achieve from therapy. Without having this understanding, we may be creating therapies that are from our own cultural viewpoint and not a good fit for an Aboriginal client.
Occupational therapists working in mental health need to recognise that the importance of connection to land, their spirituality, family and community, as this will determine their social and emotional well-being that influences their mental health. This can be accomplished through cultural safety. Occupational therapists practitioners in mental health field must also keep in mind the core skills and knowledge of occupational therapy, which include critical observation, being able to adapt the framework in occupational therapy to their specific group, as well as having intrapersonal skills to be able to work in a multiple disciplinary team.
As a student who will be entering the health field as a diversional therapist, the skills needed to meet the needs for the Indigenous population of Australia, more specifically the Wiradjuri tribe. One need that needs to be met for the people is the high rate of lung cancer, as stated by the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. Indigenous people are 1.9 times more likely to develop and die from lung cancer than non-Indigenous people. One skill needed as a diversional therapist is to meet the needs of Wiradjuri tribe is teamwork, as teamwork is a skill that is needed due to the fact that the public sector, you'll be working in a multidisciplinary team more than half the time. Furthermore, lung cancer patients may not be able to perform some physical activities, which makes flexibility as a diversional therapist important. And it allows you to change and be comfortable with current situations. Thus, to conclude, as a diversional therapist, it is important to take your client's needs into consideration.
The role of paramedics within Indigenous communities, such as that as the Wiradjuri people, can be defined according to the specific health needs and trends of those people. With many health problems in the Wiradjuri community being indicative of underlying cause, it is important that paramedics learn to utilise a patient's medical history as well as the social history to address the underlying cause rather than just the symptoms. An example of this is the elevated percentage of drug and alcohol abuse within these communities, which occur as a result of the prevalence of mental illness within them. After observing the differing health needs as well as the drastic disparity in the effectiveness of healthcare among the Wiradjuri people, it is clear that some form of strategy or change needs to be put in place in order to create better health outcomes amongst the community. Researchers Sweetie, Joshua, Moran and White say that considering that the majority of barriers facing the Indigenous population and those of a lower socioeconomic status are related to the access to healthcare, the prioritisation strategies should focus on improving access to healthcare as well as improving health literacy. With this in mind, we have decided that holding regular community health events among the Wiradjuri communities, based on a similar structure as a study conducted in 2002, which aimed to identify and overcome the barriers to Indigenous access to general practitioners within rural New South Wales. However, rather than just addressing the healthcare workers' thoughts on barriers and issues that need addressing, we would focus more on the interaction between healthcare workers and the community in an educational setting, hosted by local healthcare workers such as occupational therapists, paramedics, physiotherapists, podiatrists and sport exercise scientists. These events would have profound positive effects on the health outcomes of the Wiradjuri people. As these events would focus on public education about ways to appropriately access healthcare, ways to live a healthier lifestyle, as well as the specific roles of these healthcare workers. Said events should also benefit the local healthcare system, as having a regular interaction with the Wiradjuri community would allow for health professionals to tailor their care to the specific needs of the community, as well as creating stronger relationships between healthcare professionals and the local people, creating less of an institutionalised form of healthcare and to create a more community-centred frame of care. According to the 2011 census, approximately 40% of the Indigenous population living in the Wiradjuri region resided in a household with 2 parents and children, as well as approximately 37% living in a household with a single parent. With this information, it would be beneficial to hold educational events based around family and children's health to allow the whole family to participate and learn how to achieve better health outcomes.